Welcome to the Pitching Command Show, brought to you by Command Trakker, the smart target that MLB and D1 teams rely upon to measure and train command. Many throw hard, but few command. Visit commandtrakker.com. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, joining today's podcast is the great Scott Lovekamp, New York Yankees national crosschecker. Welcome, Scott. I'm thrilled to have you on the show.
Well, Wayne, thanks for inviting me.
In 1980, you were in Concordia College and pitched 3 years in the minor leagues. In the fall of 1980, you were in instructional league and you worked with Bobby Valentine and Tom House, who were just starting their careers. That's pretty awesome. Two great coaches.
Well, I've been lucky so many times in my career. And, Bobby was actually the field coordinator for the Padres in instructional league in Mesa, Arizona. And Tom was just starting his coaching career. So Bobby just took me under his wing, and I spent so many times. I was a small town Midwestern kid, didn't know a lot about pitching, so I absorbed everything I could from them.
Yeah, those are two legendary coaches, and Tom House is still doing great things today. Prior to your pro baseball career, you were a pitching coach in college for 8 years with MacMurray College, Missouri State, and University of Florida. You're now 31 years in pro baseball, 10 as a pitching coach with the Pirates and the Phillies, and 21 as a scout. You spent 4 years between the Padres and the Pirates, and the last 17 with the New York Yankees, starting as an area scout in 2012, and then as a pitching analyst and national crosschecker today. That's an amazing career, 31 years.
Well, I just recently had more years as a scout than a coach. I always considered myself more of a pitching coach that was scouting, but went by pretty fast. Actually, I've had a lot of good experiences, met a lot of influential people that have just continued to learn. And now with all these young coaches, I'm learning again.
Yeah, there's so many great guys in baseball. I found that a lot of them, everybody wants to help each other. And it's a really kind of nice way to deal, On this show, we talk about control, command, and sequencing, and the qualities that make for a good pitcher aside from max velocity. The idea of the show is to talk about the other qualities that are often drowned out in online discussions about what's needed to be a successful pitcher. For example, I started out in baseball when I made pitch grader because I looked at how they were analyzing TrackMan data at DBU and thought, I can do better than that and give them an edge. And then the other teams wanted it. Then I wrote that first book that became popular, and our friend Desi Druschel wrote the foreword for that book. So my background is really heavy into baseball trajectory data and 3D tools to do that. But now I'm all in on that command tracker target because I really think it's the missing link in pitcher development. And I kind of started the show because I wanted to educate people about command and control and sequencing. And kind of it promotes my target, but also promotes an idea I really believe in. Too often people confuse control and command. And on this show, that's one of the first things we try to help people understand. For example, in baseball, there's a lot of slang. So when I say command, someone else says locating. Another might say executing. Some might say quality strikes. But they kind of need to know those are all words for command. How would you describe control and how would you describe command?
Yeah, I think my answer is similar to a lot of the guys on this show. Control is the pitcher's ability to throw strikes. Whenever you talk about control, you're talking about limiting walks. And it's usually a range of innings or a large sample size over a season where he has control. You don't really go off of one game. For instance, I saw Zach Gallen walk 5 in college, and obviously he has some of the best control in baseball. So that was just one of those days. But command, on the other hand, it's the pitcher's ability to throw strikes where he wants to. So now you have a specific location. I think one of the things too in command is you want to make sure each pitch looks the same. I mean, a part of command is that each pitch looks the same coming out of his hand, so the hitter can't recognize it early.
Yeah, and hiding the ball. There's so many other aspects of pitching that I think kind of get overshadowed. That's why I think the show has been kind of being received well by people, because we're talking about things that are aside from max velo, which I still think you need. I think if you have high velo with command, that's when you start getting to be an elite pitcher. But you still need the other qualities. You know, we talked about movement and character and mental toughness, all that kind of thing. Uh,
Mhm.
as a scout, how can you tell if a player has command rather than just control? Because by watching a game, uh, how can you tell that?
Well, I think we try to make it more objective as we can and eliminate the subjectivity. So we try to chart it as much as we can. I mean, in a game, you can actually uh, chart how many times he actually hit the intended target or just where the catcher was setting up, but assuming that's where the intended target is going to be, which most of the time it is. So you can have a scale, and we know out of 20 or 25 fastballs, if he hits a certain number, that would be considered average. So you kind of a starting point for you. I think the other thing we have to consider with young pitchers is he better in a bullpen setting than he is at 7 o'clock? And so I try to watch bullpens when I can and watch him warm up. Can he hit? Can he get the glove side? Can he get to both sides of the plate? All those things matter. And then sometimes they don't have as good a command when the hitter stands in the box and now the threat steps in there. So all those things you put together to see how good a command is. It below average, above average, or average?
Yeah, because if guy stands in the box and the command goes down, I mean, I immediately think it's a mental problem. Like for example, in that pitch grader software, uh, there's an automatic stat that I call it's a mental stat. So, for example, if a guy gives up a home run and the next batter he strikes out, I give him a plus 2 points. If he walks the next guy, it's -2. And so I'm judging his mental toughness based upon how he responded to negative outcomes, you know?
Right, right. Yeah,
You know?
I think we also want to look at the misses. Are they small misses or are they big misses? And if the catcher's constantly reaching for the pitch of where he was sitting up and not setting up down the middle, what he probably should have been with that guy,
Yeah.
then it's command is he's struggling.
Yeah, like that command tracker target, I have a thing where you define the locations where you want to hit, but you also define the good misses. So you can actually tell the guy where the good misses are and give him credit for missing in the good location. Like, for example, a sinker bowler, you want the lower third of the zone, but if he misses up in the middle third, well, that's going to be a negative good miss. You want to be the bottom. And
Mhm.
the direction of the miss, we track that too. Those are kind of metrics that I don't think are really available to coaches before because it was more subjective, you know? In projecting command, would you say it's more mental or physical? If you're looking at a guy and saying, I think he's going to have great command as he gets older.
Yeah, well, it's definitely both. I mean, I think you have the delivery working in tandem with the mental system.
Yeah.
I think most agree the key to locating your fastball. You probably a simple delivery, direct delivery is involved.
Yeah.
Certainly repeatable release points, but it's combined with the guys that can locate usually have the ability to I think intentionally focus or
Yes.
concentrate. I know Emo talked about catch plays where it all starts. I think, of course, I couldn't agree more than that. And can you focus for 20 minutes and just focus on making good throws, every throw count, and not
Mhm.
having your mind wander and thinking about something else?
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people talk about variability in your delivery and they talk about different types of training to account for that. And every guest that says it, I always tell them, oh, in my background in audio engineering, the idea was you get rid of the noise before it gets into the system. To me, a delivery that's sound and head's quiet, everything's online, you have less variability, you have less chance for error and less opportunity you have to deal with that error, you know?
I think, and, one of the things in my coaching career, I felt like timing or basically repeating timing or at foot plant, at release, those two positions were probably the guys that the most common of guys that had good command. And I mean, it's nothing, anything earth shattering. But I always could sense when a guy has good timing, when he got his foot down and then he tried to throw the ball, and guys, when they were too quick and they were out of sync, that's when they were missing arm side or yanking, the typical thing that happens. So, I mean, I felt like timing was probably the most important of everything.
Yeah, and also little things I looked for is a guy ragging his head off. Like what's his head doing? I found if his head's moving too much, he's not going to be commanding very well. I noticed that.
Yeah. Late head movement is still one of the things I'd probably avoid.
Yeah. And the other big one for me too is following through the ball, not 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 kind of releasing the ball and kind of pulling off, but like going through the pitch. Like if you're punching and boxing, you punch through, or if you're running to the base, you run through the base. So I think when you're pitching to get better command, you have to pitch through. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I was always a big throw through the target guy.
Yeah.
I still think it applies.
How has scouting and pitching changed in the last 15 years? I know that's a big question because there's been a lot of changes and you've seen a lot of that change.
Yeah, I think I'll take pitching first. I mean, I think, since we were kids and in the 60s, 100 years, it's been stuff and command. And all we had was ERA and strikeouts and walks. But specifically, I think, about 15 years ago, but even specifically more into the 2015, things really changed. We got analytics got involved with all the data. And then the advancements in player development in their processes, that they could really started to enhance our players and our pitchers more, I think. And they really made an impact with all the new advancements in technology and edgertronic cameras, and motion capture, which improved, I think, the way we can teach mechanics. We got them stronger. 2016 draft was the famous draft with Bieber and Gallen, and the Cleveland had, Savali and Plesac and Bieber. They were strike throwers who got bigger, stronger, and their stuff. College guys actually improved their velocity, improved their breaking balls, which we hadn't seen college guys really develop that much in pro ball before, quite as much. But so it was just more the high school projection. So I think that was the first thing that changed in the pitching. Obviously, the velocity made a jump. I think it jumped about, when I looked, it was, I think 90, 91 probably in 2015. And then now it's 93 plus is average.
Now seeing a guy throw 95 to 100 is common. It's not such. I've been talking about that a lot, is that it used to be that was the outlier, that was the rare event, and now it's the common event. And that's why we're promoting command, because if you have that high velocity with command, that makes you elite, I think.
I looked it up today that in the 2023 draft, just recently, there were 180 pitchers who maxed out at 95. And that's what I know of. There may have been a few more that we didn't know about, and then there was even 4 guys hit 100. So the velocities increased. I think strength and conditioning's made more of an impact. Pitchers started getting bigger and stronger, using their lower half. And then I guess a couple other things. Fastball usage obviously has dropped from 60% down to 48% this year.
Well, yeah, but now that's because batters are training on the fastball all day.
Yeah.
And I have this Velo Maniac joke series. I don't know if you've ever seen them. And one of the jokes is, if your fastball is as straight as a snag fishing line, you might be a Velo Maniac. It's kind of like the redneck jokes, but Velo Maniac. But if you don't have stuff, I don't care how fast it is, these MLB batters, they can time that up.
Yeah, on the scouting side, we just have so much more information now than we used to. I mean, in 2014, we started getting data and synergy. So on the college pitchers, there's so much performance data, and then TrackMan, Rapsodo, and now Hawkeye, and Kinetrack. So and then we get edgertronic cameras, so now we can get high speed video on the pitchers. We can really break down their mechanics. We know their miss rates, their strike percentages, their in zone percentages. So much more data. So it's just better information. And then obviously the last piece of that was adding the performance science aspect of it and R&D to where now we're basically testing the physical testing aspect of it.
Yeah, it's like in 2016, that's when I came in to the data. When I saw that data at DBU and I made Pitch Grader. And when I saw it beginning, they were using Tableau to use the data. And they were really only using it for velocity and spin rate. And I kind of looked at that and said, well, you have a lot of data here. It's not being used. You have to put it in a form that's usable. So uh, that's when Pitch Grader made it 3D and made it much more accessible, because I view data as it's a tool for a coach, but a coach has to have access to it in a way that is not biased by the software. Meaning that I don't want to give that coach my opinion of the data. I want to let him find what he's looking for. So I think a lot of times people get a lot of data, but it can be skewed with a bias for some kind of outcome.
Yeah, sure. We have a complete analytic department that
Yeah, you
especially
got a
going
good
through the
department.
draft. So
Yeah. Now here's another really hard question: is that on the next 15 years, what impact do you think AI is going to have on scouting? I mean, MLB is working with the Uplift AI for baseball using iPhone cameras. I think MLB teams already have, you know, ways of capturing data that far superior to that, and they still haven't been able to predict outcomes with certainty. I mean, there are great tools that don't proclaim AI, and such as Bobby Tewksbury Pelotero, Tom House's Mustard app, and some others. Uh, but AI, to me, projecting is questionable, especially since there are so many variables while a player is developing. For example, remember I was talking earlier to you about I used a well-known AI program to create some pitch sequences, and I told it what the constraints and preferences were. Yet it made a mistake that clearly ignored the constraints I told it. And then the AI apologized to me. But I said, how could you have made that mistake? And then the AI froze, and then it said load error and stopped. So, in other words, uh, I don't think it's as advanced as some people really would proclaim it to be.
you're talking to a scout, so I'm always going to say I still think we need human beings at the ballpark because it's just hard to um, artificially do that. So you have to see in person and be able to see how the ball is moving, see how the hitters are reacting. You can't even see that on video, really. So
I think you're right.
I don't think we can't replace that. Now, I could use an assistant that could input all my numbers on a spreadsheet for me, and I think that's might be something that I could use.
So I don't think AI scouting is going to replace human scouts. It will be a tool that scouts use. It's like Richard Feynman was asked if a computer will ever think like a human. And he said, and I agree, no, much like we make machines that fly like an airplane. It flies very well and very fast, but it doesn't fly like a butterfly. They do similar tasks to a degree, but fundamentally they're very different. Uh, and also, like a human could see a guy walking in the distance, and just at a glance, he can look at it and say, "Ah, that's Scott." There's something about that guy walking that looks like Scott because there's something about him. Computers are not up to that yet. And just like if you go on a website, you ever see those captchas? They show you images before you can enter something to see if you're a human. It's
Mm-hmm.
so easy for a human to do that, but for a computer, it's very hard. So I don't think that AI is going to replace scouts. I think there'll be AI assistants for scouts, but I think a human has to still do the scouting, you know? Another thing I wanted to touch on is with everybody throwing hard nowadays, to me, I think command is now the separator. What do you think? is separating the players now in the pitchers?
Well, I think there's so many things that we talked about a little bit earlier off camera. It was just, knowing who you are and having an identity. So I think, obviously you got stuff, and stuff plus has become big. So command is probably the biggest separator for sure, but you have the performance data that can kind of help you out with that. But I mean, delivery can be a separator, makeup can be a separator. Um, what kind of things enhance their pitches? Do they have good TrackMan? Do they have what kind of movement on their pitches? The spin, so there's so many factors now that
Well,
you
see,
can.
I love to hear that from you because when you see things online, everyone thinks it's velo. Oh, if I have the highest velo, I'm going to get scouted. I'm going to get drafted. And we all know it's like, well, that may be part of it, but there are other qualities that scouts are looking for, not just your velo, like we talked about character uh, for a number of different things. But I also think for in the minor leagues, it's very hard. Everyone's working very hard, and if you don't have the character to do the right things when you should, rather than what you want to do, if you know how to keep up with your teammates and lift them up while they lift you up, I think there's so many other qualities that a good pitcher really needs. You know.
Well, the work ethic has always been important, but I think the curiosity and the work ethic is even just as, or more important nowadays, because it's become a 12-month job, and the off season nowadays is a critical time period with most teams, and especially the successful organizations who are developing pitchers, because they are developing strength, they're adding strength, they're improving flexibility, mobility, they may be adding velocity, or maybe completely changing a pitch, and they come back to next year and all of a sudden they're this bigger, stronger guy that has improved his lower half mechanics, and now he's throwing harder, he's got a little bit better movement maybe, but all of a sudden he's got two breaking balls, and holy cow, he's become a wholly different type of prospect.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Without saying anything specific about the Yankees, uh, how has like scouting and player development collaboration evolved over the years? I mean,
Yeah, I've done both, and I've been on both sides, and there's oftentimes when both sides don't actually get along too well. You can get into situations where you're confrontational. So um, I
well,
think,
that was an odd thing I found from another person I was talking to in scouting. I had always thought that scouting and player development would be like two peas in a pod, like scout for the players that we need, and that the front office would be tied in with the scouting and player. Like I thought it would be very like much on the same train, but it seems like they sometimes they aren't. You know.
yeah, no, sometimes they aren't, and it can be a little territorial sometimes on both sides, but I think with us and Sam Breen,
Oh,
he wants.
Sam is awesome. He's a
He,
great coach and also a great guy. Yeah.
he wants to he wants to work together, and from the day he stepped or signed and came in to be in the complex in Tampa. So I think I moved to Tampa 5 years ago just to be around the coaches and be part of the pitching department. They've accepted me as part of their pitching department, which it's up to them how good a relationship they want to have. If they don't want to have a good relationship with scouts, then we're not going to have a good relationship. But I think the
But
benefit.
I think it's really important. It's not my business scouting, but in even what I do with the data, I would have thought it was extremely important so that you scout for the play you're scouting, but that you get the players that fit with the team. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. So you're trying to work together to find the pieces to fit that puzzle, right?
Yeah, Wayne, that's 100% right, because I think I think it's made us better at drafting, knowing which pitchers will have a higher likelihood of improving in our system, right? And
Yeah.
and that's the biggest change. And then we have a lot more collaboration, and not just between scouting and pitching department, but also in the other departments of strength and conditioning, mental skills, nutrition. The trainers, the doctors, and all and performance science. So all those performances, all those different departments are all integrated. So, I remember Wes Johnson telling me back when he was at DBU, it's like the first team, the first organization who can get, I guess the term was break down all the silos and get integrated between all the departments is going to really have a lot of success. And he was predicted this way back whenever that was, that year when he was at DBU.
He's a great coach. He's had a lot of success,
Yeah. He's been great. So, we weren't the first one to do it by any means. But we're catching up.
I see a lot of videos online of people throwing hard. Have you noticed too? But have you really looked? A lot of them are barely having control, let alone command. So guys, I think, are chasing max velocity without regard for useful velocity, and it kind of drowns out the other things that we talked about. Is that your feeling? I mean, how do you feel about what you see online being promoted? Because it affects the kind of guys you're going to scout, because they're chasing the things that are promoted as important online,
Well, I all we can do is educate them to what the Yankees are looking for. I can't speak for 29 other teams or college or anything.
Yeah,
So we do, we have our scouting department does a large amount of Zoom calls, and anytime we're asked what we're looking for, then we try to be as honest as possible that we can. Velocity is important, but it's not the most important thing, and it does make your other pitches better. And obviously, when you talk about pitchers like Strider and they are throwing hard, and they're the top, Zach Wheeler and Garrett Cole. I mean, they do have velocity is a big part of their repertoire arsenal.
Yeah, it's definitely needed. It's just what I was getting at is when you see things online, they're teaching these kids that it's the only thing you need. And we all know it's not the only thing. It's something you do need, but not the only one,
Velocity is not the separator anymore.
Yeah.
Like you said originally, it is more, is it playable? What does Emo say? Useful velocity? I kind of like that.
Yeah, I love his sayings, Like he had another one the other day. He said, I want MLB, I don't need minor league throwers. I need MLB pitchers. He distills everything down into great little things. That's what makes him a great coach,
Yeah.
I think, I'm promoting my target, of course, but I really think the problem with developing command is simple, is that they don't actually practice it, like when I talked about the videos online and things like that, a lot of the practice I see when they think they're practicing command, they're really practicing control. Like a lot of people point to using a TrackMan to show pick up the location where the ball was, and they say they're working on command. But what they're doing is they're asking the pitcher to picture an imaginary spot in space and then throw to that imaginary spot. Then they're measuring his ability to where is that imaginary spot, and did he hit it? It's like, that's not really quantitative in any way, In your coaching days, what kind of methods would you have used for command?
Well, I was coaching around the 90s with the Braves, and so I read everything I could about Mazzoni and Maddox and Glavine and Smoltz and that era, and they were a big thing about down and away strikes and inside balls. So everything played off the down and away fastball. So we would spend more time trying to get that pitch. I think Nolan Ryan was always that way too. Everything I had read was all about focusing on a small target, whether it's a dime in the catcher's mitt or a scratch in the shin guard, and visualization was trying to have the best mechanics. Back then, pitchers were talking about they had to stay on it longer, keep their head on it, keep their front side on it, and things like that.
That's what I was talking about. Staying through the ball is that I found that helped with command when they stayed on the pitch longer.
One of the things differently about the 90s was that the cues were more about nice and easy, under control. I mean, the guys, Maddox would even say, and you could ask him, but that he could throw harder if he wanted to, but he just, and I think the strike zone was a little bit more east and west. So maybe it allowed you to stretch the zone out further and further if you had really good command. So maybe it changed. One of the other things that's changed recently, it came with the intent. So intent became important, and then it became throwing harder with more intent, and the strike zone changed to where it went north and south. So now umpires will call the high strike more, which played into the ride and fastball, and they won't give you off the plate. So I think it all ties together, and plus the hitters' approach changed as well, right? So now hitters are trying to do more damage, and they're trying to lift the ball. They're doing damage no matter what the count is, and so a lot of things have changed, and I think pitching is dictated more sometimes by what hitters are trying to do as well. So if they're going to try to keep
Absolutely.
lifting, then we're going to do.
Absolutely. Like in that program I told you about Pitch Grader, there's another thing in there. It's called the pitch designer. I have a pitch sequence designer we could talk about in a minute, but the pitch designer has been in the air since like 2016. You take a guy's pitch, it loads it in, and then you adjust variables like his spin rate, the velocity, and all kinds of parameters. And then you could see how the ball moves. I use that also as a visualization to show a guy, well, if you throw your pitch harder, here's how much less it moves. You see the change in the shape of the pitch. And so if they're sometimes throwing a pitch harder makes it too straight. It's more hittable. They throw it a little easier and you got more movement on it, so the ball has more time to move.
I read something the other day that I'm still interested in. Is Matt Olson. This is a completely different topic, but Matt Olson was talking about he started doing better when he started swinging easier. My generation was still about how to throw easy velocity, and I was talking to Gil about it the other day, actually, or texting with him about it. Just can you throw harder, easier instead of pulling off and head whacking and things and just trying to so those are the kind we want starting pitchers basically, and I think it's something that any scout would tell you is that we are trying to draft starting pitching that they still have a large amount of value, even though they're throwing fewer innings and nobody's getting to 200 innings anymore. They still have the same value as they always have. And so how do you get starting pitching? Well, one of the things most of them do is they're able to command with a little bit more ease and less effort, and they're able to stay healthy and get to 170, 180 innings and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think Dan Duquette was saying the best ability is availability.
Yes, right.
And I think Sam Brand says that he promotes that with your players as well. It's like being available to pitch is one of the best abilities.
They do a good job with that. They really do.
Yeah, they're awesome. I was talking a bit with Sam about this the other day, and it's kind of a different kind of. Some people agree, some don't. But I've been thinking on sequencing. In football, they have playbooks. In martial arts, they have patterns, and in boxing, they have combinations. And I was thinking in pitching, there should be something like pitching gamuts, whether 2 pitches or 3 pitches, basically kind of like some tools you keep with you that in certain situations, based upon the batter, what's going on in the field, the count, what pitches are working for you that day, that you can pull out these 2 or 3 kind of combinations that would work for you. Because a lot of times the catcher might not be fully in tune with what you're capable of. So I kind of thought that those would be useful.
Yeah, the one thing that comes to mind right away, Pete Vukovich, I was around him quite a bit with coaching with the Pirates. He was a former Cy Young winner with Milwaukee, and then he was a major league pitching coach and a pro scout, and just a really intelligent pitcher and with a large amount of experience. And anytime he would come into town, I would just sit with him and just ask him questions, and he would tell me stories, about how he lost a game in the World Series because Yount Molitor couldn't hear Yount tell him a sinker was coming. There was a ball down the line when he didn't shade the line, things like that. So, but Vuk really helped me with how to get a righty to strike out a lefty. and with who didn't have a great changeup, for instance, and he would just talk about two pitch combinations that you would throw a fastball up and in, followed by a back foot cutter or a back foot slider, but you had to throw the fastball in first, and then the slider had to play right off of that fastball and the
Right,
back
right,
foot.
right.
Yeah, and the second thing I think that I really enjoyed was occasionally I'll get to advance with us if they need a guy, and last year um, they were a man short, so I was able to. I started out with the Twins and then the Braves for about 4 weeks, but I watched the Twins pitch for about 10 days, and Sonny Gray, he was something that was never 10 years ago they didn't do, but he would throw three fastballs in on a left-hand hitter. One was a cut fastball, one was a sinker, and one was a straight one. And they all three, you didn't know
Ooh,
which direction it was going. And I thought that was so fascinating to be able to do
yeah,
that.
I was going to say, start off to a lefty, going above the hands, a sinker, but on the black. And then you follow it up with a cutter in the shadow zone at the same kind of location. It ties them up. It's like there's certain combinations that just work. And I always thought like pitchers ought to be taught those combinations. I mean, you have to command that, but uh, I think teaching when you teach command, I think the next step is how to use your command, because you can have great command, but if you don't know how to use it, you're going to be launching balls out in the parking lot, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great. We have Andy Pettit hanging around with our major league pitchers and just to
Oh,
learn from
that's awesome.
CC Sabathia, guys like that.
Yeah, like that combination I talked about. I've also noticed that if you throw the cutter first and then the sinker gets launched into orbit.
Hmm.
So the combination matters, you know, like what goes first matters, you
Well, see,
know,
I learned something there. I didn't know that.
you know. And when I was saying I was using AI tools to kind of figure out some things, I was trying to explore these different combinations based upon certain rules. And like I use those rules in software and what we hard code them. I wanted to see if I defined the rules in words and had AI give me solutions, if they would be different, you know? Degrading command can often indicate fatigue or injury. I think that also has implications for scouting too. The problem is to know if command is degrading because it's not so easy to detect in a game. Another issue is that players don't want to say something because they might be shut down and lose an opportunity. So detecting command digression would have to be detected by the coaches. How do you feel about that? I mean, some people think that you should wait until they have control issues. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's a real thing. And I remember even back in the late 90s. I mean, I had a pitcher that ended up having a really nice big league career, but he had six straight starts to start out the season where he was just fantastic. I mean, he was hitting every spot. And then the next start, he was a little bit shaky. He missed some spots, missed over the plate, didn't do as well. And then the next start was the same. And I just then you of course I think the first thing a coach does is go back and look at the videos, like what's different? Well, how's the delivery changed? But it looked the same. And then luckily I had a guy like Tom House to call, and he's like, no, he's fatigued. He hasn't recovery obviously, and workload management is so far ahead of where we were back then. We had no idea, but now it's critical to the organization and preventing injury or reducing injuries, I guess I should say. But so back then it was just like, well, just throw. But now it would be a deload. So back then we just called it throw less, run more, and then everything was fine. So yeah, it's a real thing. Fatigue and recovery is huge, and I think we can monitor it better now. We have different tests that they go through to prevent fatigue or improve
Yeah,
recovery, I guess I should say.
yeah, but detecting whether it's fatigue or injury, that's probably the real tough one,
I
you
think
know.
you have to be able to have I mean, I don't know. It's hard to change because kids they don't want to
They
go in
want
that
to tell
training
you.
room. Mhm.
Yeah, they want to tell you because they don't want to lose an opportunity. And
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
I've never heard a coach, say, hey, we're not going to pitch you. I mean, they're always going to put his health first.
yeah, but if you ask a player, can you go today?
Yeah.
They're going to say yeah, because they want the opportunity, you
Mhm.
know. But I think a lot of injuries, it's not my area. but it seems to me that a lot of injuries have probably happened when you're tired.
Yeah.
Have you what in your coaching days? What do you find that?
Sure. I think fatigue is probably, I don't know if it's not the number one reason, it's one of the biggest risk factors for sure. I mean, we have all kinds of ways to try to prevent that, but if you can't, it's hard when a player doesn't go in and tell you the truth.
Yeah. Well, they don't want to lose an opportunity. I can understand why they do that, you know.
Mhm.
But it's still, I wonder why it's been so different now than back in the 80s. I imagine they're throwing a lot harder more often. But again, that's not my area of expertise. I'm just kind of guessing,
I
you
think
know.
well, like I said, the workload management has become important. I think guys are obviously too now. A lot of the minor league guys are pitching once a week, and they're not pitching every 5 days like they did 20 years ago. So there's more rest time in between. They're monitoring them. They don't have 2 heavy days in a row. They're basically. Well, I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. They're doing so many things better than they did. We did 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I've been asking people because I've been wondering whether I should promote my target as a way to, uh, if you're using that, say, once a week in part of your bullpens, you can more precisely monitor command. And if you saw the command digressing, then maybe can alert you to a possible fatigue or injury. But since I don't know enough about that area, I wasn't sure if that would be a valid statement, you know?
Well, I think it's something that would okay. Hey, let's how is he recovered? And they got other ways to find out too.
Now, here comes the really hard one. Uh, I have a list of about 9 items that I think are really important for a pitcher to have. Everyone struggles with this because you need all of them. Uh, and I'm trying to find the top four. So, like, what would be your top four? I'm going to show you a list. You tell me what you think is your number one, your number two, and number three, and number four. And I'll read them off for people who are listening. The first is character, command, changing speeds, movement, max velocity, reading batters, mental toughness, and know who you are. Now, if you go online, everyone will tell you that you need max velocity only.
There's a funny story to this that I remember. I think it was Mazzoni would always ask his pitchers, how would you rank location, movement, change of speeds, and velocity? The four things you could do to baseball. Actually, change of speeds, you need two pitches to actually do. You can't do it with one pitch and change speeds on it. But and he would, I think it was Mazzoni, but it would be, and so they would always say, okay, location or command one, movement or change of speeds 2 and 3, velocities 4, and it's like, well, then why are you trying to throw the ball as hard as you can if velocity is the least important of those four?
Yeah, the other one that I didn't put on here because it's one that I kind of really like is changing angles. And what I mean by that is changing horizontal and vertical approach angles, you know?
Sure, sure. Well, I'll go with command one and movement two. I think I'm pretty confident 1 and 2. After that, I run into a little bit of an issue, but max velocity. If you just had velocity, I might put that in there because it is important, but you
Yeah.
can pitch well without it. I don't know if you actually need it. There's several
I th-
pitchers that would.
yeah, I think there's probably a minimum velocity you might need, you know?
Yes. Yeah. So I would say command, movement, changing speeds, and then I really like know who you are. I'm going to put that in the top four because I've talked to so many pitchers, and I think nowadays it's even more important of basically having an identity and knowing yourself and knowing what you're good at. I mean, Derek Johnson talks about be great at what you do good. I mean, but you got to
I,
know
I,
what you do good first
oh,
before you can actually and coaches and analytic guys, analysts, everybody can help you with where your pitchers play the best and what locations are best for you. But sometimes you have to have a different plan against righties and a different plan against lefties. So if you don't know who you are and what you do well, then it's going to be tough to be successful.
yeah. No, I was going to say I love DJ. He's an awesome guy. When I started out, doing pitch grader. Nobody ever heard of me. I'm just some guy in Selden. Nobody, nothing to do ever with baseball. I was talking to him on the phone. So, he's calling me like I'm a somebody when I was I'm just a nobody. That's the kind of guy he is. Just like he's really nice and very smart.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy talking to him when I get a chance to.
Yeah. So I'm glad you chose those because I think know who you are is also very important because we talked about earlier is that uh, you have to make decisions about your career. You have to know who you are to know if those decisions are right for you. You know.
Well, those other things are important too, but I think you can maybe reading hitters and sequencing, you can have a catcher do that for you. And it's important, but
Yeah, and character, I think, is also really important. I think they're all important. That's why it's a tough one for most people.
sure. Yeah.
Well, Scott, it's been great having you on. I love talking with you, and I learn every time I talk with you, I learn something. Like we've been chatting for days. It's been great.
Well, I enjoyed it. I love pitching, talking pitching as much as anybody too. So thanks for having me on.
Well, yeah, and we'll keep talking.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right.
Pitching Command Show, brought to you by Command Trakker, the smart target that MLB and D1 teams rely upon to measure and train command. Many throw hard, but few command. Visit commandtracker.com.